In the early days of our republic, the United States made a choice about its relationship with Latin America. President James Monroe, who was also a former Secretary of State, declared that the United States would unilaterally, and as a matter of fact, act as the protector of the region. The doctrine that bears his name asserted our authority to step in and oppose the influence of European powers in Latin America. And throughout our nation's history, successive presidents have reinforced that doctrine and made a similar choice. Today, however, we have made a different choice. The era of the Monroe Doctrine is over. The relationship, that's worth applauding. That's not a bad thing.
With Venezuela in the midst of political upheaval, the country's president has sent a warning to his people. Nicolas Maduro says they shouldn't trust the faked version of events in the country that the United States is trying to promote. He even went further, threatening the US with a second Vietnam-like war.
Since they cannot fake Venezuela and Maduro having weapons of mass destruction to intervene against us, they now make up lies on a daily basis and false news to justify aggression against our country. Let's not allow another war like Vietnam. In Latin America, if the government of the United States intends to intervene against us, they will have another Vietnam, worse than you can imagine.
The warning comes after Washington announced its full support of self-declared interim President Juan Guaido. With the split becoming deeper by the day, Murad Gaziev looks at the choices for Venezuela.
Venezuela is a country of two realities. So stark, so profound are the differences in opinion. In one reality, President Maduro is trying to put down a rebellion, stop an upstart, a usurper, Juan Guaido. He's trying to prevent mutiny in the army, even as we hear calls on CNN to supply rebels with weapons. And he's afraid that Trump has ordered him killed.
No doubt that Trump gave an order to kill me. He told the Colombian government, the Colombian mafia, to kill me. If something happens to me one day, Donald Trump and the Colombian president will be responsible.
There is also a parallel reality, born in no small part thanks to the United States. First, Chavez, now Maduro, have long been a thorn in Washington's side. In this reality, Guaido is the real president. He is America's candidate. Trump congratulated him on becoming president. They discuss what to do with the former dictator, Maduro. They discuss business, politics. He has America's blessing and its protection.
I reiterate that the United States will hold Venezuelan security forces responsible for the safety of all U.S. diplomatic personnel, the National Assembly, and President Guaido. Any violence against these groups would signify a grave assault on the rule of law and will be met with a significant response.
Sure, now, with the guarantee of safety, of invulnerability, Mr. Guaido wasted no time before beginning to issue orders.
Soldiers of Venezuela, today I give you an order. Don't shoot the Venezuelan people. Don't shoot those who in a clear and constitutional way have been defending your family, your people, your work, your way of life. Today, soldiers of Venezuela, I give you an order. Don't repress peaceful demonstrations like before.
Such familiar scenes. We see this all over the world. Palestinians protesting in the occupied territories, the Yellow Vests in France, Catalan separatists in Spain, protesters in the US. But when police bully, beat and arrest in those countries, that's fine and dandy. When they do it in Venezuela, that's suppression of democracy, an attack on the free world.
Maduro is not the democratically elected president of Venezuela. He tramples democracy, human rights and the rule of law. The hope for a new start is linked with the only democratically legitimate institution in the country, namely the National Assembly and its president, Juan Guaido. That's why, together with the EU, we have offered our political support to him.
For the US, Guaido is the cake. sweet and pliable. But wait, there's icing on top.
Those agreements that have not been recognized by the National Assembly are illegal. We will not recognize illegal agreements. China has to understand that, and Russia has to understand that.
Two realities, two presidents, two governments, two Venezuelas. Of course, it cannot continue like this. A house divided cannot stand. Eventually, these two realities will merge. Let's just hope it won't be through civil war.
Понимаем и знаем, что ситуация в Венесуэле остается сложной.
Sabemos que la situación en Venezuela sigue siendo complicada.
Поддерживаем ваши усилия на то, чтобы добиться взаимопонимания в обществе.
Apoyamos sus esfuerzos para conseguir entendimiento mutuo en su sociedad.
И все ваши действия направлены на урегулирование отношений с оппозицией.
Estoy muy contento de estar aquí.
Мы осуждаем любые действия, которые носят явно террористический характер, любые попытки изменить ситуацию с помощью силы.
Así como intentos de cambiar la situación por el uso de fuerza.
Hemos sido sometidos a todo tipo de agresiones, amenazas.
Мы были объектом самого различного рода угроз, агрессии.
Y eso ha significado un proceso de aprendizaje.
Но в ходе этого процесса мы учились.
Siempre nuestra región fue tratada de esa forma, de hace 100 años para acá.
К нашему региону всегда относились таким образом на протяжении последних 100 лет и более.
Y creo que hemos encontrado el punto para avanzar.
И я знаю, что все, что будет дальше, будет лучше.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo goes before the UN Security Council tomorrow to try to gain support for a new government in Venezuela. The country is being torn apart right now, its economy in ruins, people fleeing by the thousands. Manuel Bojorquez tonight is on a bridge that connects Venezuela and Colombia.
One way to spot Venezuelans fleeing the crisis at home, the luggage, the family dog in tow. Javier Hernandez, his wife Maria Elena, and 6-year-old son David left Caracas for Colombia 2 days ago.
Dying of hunger, el hambre. There's no food.
More than 2 million Venezuelans have fled to neighboring countries in the past 4 years.
Tell Trump that if he knocks down Maduro, you'll build the wall and paint it for him.
Opposition leader Juan Guaido made his first public appearance in days. He called for a major demonstration next week after recent clashes left at least 20 dead. Nicolás Maduro refuses to back down as more Venezuelans like Javier, Maria Elena, and David take their next steps toward an uncertain future. Manuel Bojorquez, CBS News, Cúcuta, Colombia.
Breaking tonight, the socialist dictatorship of Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela is no longer. Venezuela has a new president, a leader chosen by the people and supported by the United States of America. Here is my exclusive interview with our Vice President, Mike Pence. There's something else going on as well, because Vladimir Putin, I was told by the former Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez of Venezuela, I was told by her that they're doing business with him. They're doing business with the Chinese. They're doing business with the Iranians, that they're open for business, basically, to, you know, all the folks that we don't like so much. But anyway, Ms. Rodriguez did point this out. Now that there is a president that has a relationship with us, who wants freedom for his people, how does that change the Putin equation, the Chinese, the Iranians?
We've seen Russia, China, and Cuba engage in what we'll call debt diplomacy with Venezuela. And what we will ask of the new transitional government is simply that they uphold their constitution and the rule of law. Many of those arrangements were simply made unilaterally by the Maduro regime and never approved through the National Assembly and the legislature as the Constitution requires. But look, our hope is that this is a new beginning for our relationship with Venezuela. And more importantly, that it's a new beginning for the Venezuelan people. I must tell you, Trish, I've rarely been more moved than to see the vast crowds that took to the streets today in Venezuela, waving Venezuelan flags and standing up for freedom, standing up for democracy and fair elections and the rule of law. And I'm very inspired by the courage of all of those in the opposition who've been willing to stand up to a regime that has used violence to oppress its critics, that has jailed its opposition in the past. We've seen the brutality of the Maduro regime, and so the courage that President Guaido has shown, the courage that all of those in the opposition have shown to bring this day about is not lost on President Trump. It's not lost on me, and we're going to continue to stand firm with the people of Venezuela until freedom and democracy are restored.
Mm-hmm. Lillian Lopez, Tintorni Lopez, told me that, and this is the woman who's married to Leopoldo Lopez, who probably would have been president in a fair election because he's the most popular politician. There he was jailed by
Another
Maduro.
courageous man.
Truly, truly. I mean, and courageous woman and courageous family, because there are other things they could do than take on this fight. But they took it on, and Lillian, I know, met with you, met with the president. But for her, this was a breakthrough because she wasn't able to get any traction, shall we say, during the previous administration. For whatever reason, it wasn't as big a priority. You know, when I hear you talk about those crowds and how it's sort of an emotional experience watching them, I felt the same way. And I think that as Americans, you know, we want what's right for people. We want people to be able to control their own destiny. But why this sort of sense that they could handle it on their own previously, and why the change? Is that just a different view of the world from this administration versus the last?
Well, President Trump had a unique appreciation for the challenges in Venezuela from early in this administration. And he deployed the full resources of our Treasury Department to sanction more than 50 officials in the Maduro regime, including many very close to Nicolas Maduro. We've provided more than $100 million in humanitarian assistance to those who have fled Venezuela. And my wife and I have visited refugee camps in countries around the region. But the president had a priority early in this administration that we were going to take actions necessary to isolate the Maduro regime economically and diplomatically, simply to empower the people of Venezuela to seize this moment in history for freedom. And the Lopez family led the way. They showed extraordinary courage in that. And now with President Guaido, we are going to continue to stand with him, with other countries that are recognizing him as the legitimate president of Venezuela. And the American people are going to continue to stand with and pray for the people of Venezuela until freedom is restored.
Are you going to invite President Guaido here?
I will leave that decision to the President of the United States. But this is a good day for freedom. And the American people and this president, this administration will continue to stand without apology for freedom and with President Guaido.
We also today call on the Venezuelan military and security forces to accept the peaceful, democratic, and constitutional transfer of power. I call on all responsible nations to recognize interim President Guaido immediately. Maduro has made clear he will not recognize Guaido or call for new elections. Now is the time to stand for democracy and prosperity in Venezuela.
Ambassador Bolton, if I could, you mentioned the word significant response. How do you define significant response?
Well, we're not going to define it because we want the Venezuelan security forces to know how strongly we think that President Guaido, the National Assembly, the opposition, and most importantly, American personnel are not harmed. This is an unequivocal statement on our part.
Is there any circumstance under which American forces would get involved?
Look, the President has made it very clear on this matter that all options are on the table.
What's your outlook for the Fed?
Well, I think the Fed is going to go pause here for an extended period, at least into the second quarter, or maybe even into the third quarter. The risks for them in taking a pause are pretty low. Inflationary pressure is waning at the moment because of energy price collapse. And ultimately, as the second half of the year comes around, I think we'll start to see price pressure start to build again, and then the Fed will start hiking rates again in the second half going into 2020.
And do you care about the shape of the yield curve?
Oh, I think the shape of the yield curve is one of the most valuable predictors of forward economic activity. And the fact that, we got extremely flat as the Fed raised rates is telling us that that's probably leading us into a recession. If you look at where the shape of the yield curve is today, historically we would expect a recession probably in about 1 to 1.5 years as things evolve.
And is that when you expect us to have a recession?
I think so. It all depends on what happens now. If the Fed is forced to reduce rates because of some other exogenous event that's out there, then history shows us that allows the expansion to continue, but it also allows the excesses to build up. And we already have a lot of excesses in the system, especially in the area of corporate leverage. So that would push the recession further out, but it would also make it more severe.
Where are you most worried about excessive corporate leverage?
Well, media companies, telecom companies are pretty over-levered. When you look at investment grade debt, there is a large percentage of investment grade debt that if you just took the rating agency standards for leverage should already be below investment grade. So when the downturn comes, I think that the rating agencies are going to have to do a broad re-rating, and we're going to see an explosion in the number of fallen angels, and probably maybe $1 trillion or more.
And what do you think about where valuations are right now for equities?
I think valuations are pretty fair. Given the earnings growth where we are right now, I think we probably have some room for multiple expansion. So I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we could see stocks higher. But that would fit the recession story. Historically, stocks peak, about 3 to 6 months before a recession. So if I'm right and we're having a recession in 2020, we probably have a last hurrah left for stocks.
Is there any pocket that you think will do particularly well over that time period before the recession?
I think technology is going to bounce back, and you're starting to see it on a relative performance basis. I think that for speculators is a great place to be. For investors, might be a good time to use the strength to lighten up.
And how are you positioning your portfolios?
We really de-risked a lot last year. So by the time we got to August and September, we were basically out of our equity positions, out of high yield in accounts where we have that flexibility. And so when the downturn came in the market, we fared fairly well. Of course, in the snapback, we're lagging. But again, I always fundamentally try to get people to understand, are you a trader or are you an investor? If you're a trader, you should think about the next 6 months. If you're an investor, you should think about the next 5 years. And I think for the next 5 years, it's probably a good time to to keep your powder dry and look for an opportunity in a couple of years.
Is there any market dynamics that worry you right now?
Well, besides the over leverage in the corporate sector, which is the big concern I have, I am concerned about the complacency. Even though equities have gone as far as they have, investors are pretty willing to plow right back in as soon as they think that things have gotten safer. In the downturn back in November and December, the most stark thing to me was how quickly the exits got crowded. It didn't take much bad news to get to the point that sellers were clogging the exits. And in certain areas like leveraged loans or asset-backed securities, prices would gap on a daily basis on virtually no volume. And so that basically is telling you that there was nobody ready to step in and buy in any size. And at the same time, there were a lot of sellers. So I think the fact that people have made so much over the last decade on risk assets has caused them to become overly complacent and realize that that you can't wait till the last minute to make the adjustments to your portfolio. And how is that going to play out when we have the next downturn that actually lasts and sticks? Well, I think when we get to that, we're going to find out that these gapping markets, that we are a long way from where we can find any buyer in size. And so when you look at what happened, for instance, with bank loans in the fourth quarter and ETFs, the marginal seller was coming out of mutual funds and ETFs. The volume in terms of the total capital markets was pretty small, but yet the moves that we were getting were pretty big. And so when we get to the point where we get the real storm, we're so far away in pricing from where there's value to where investors that are basically being speculators are in, that it's going to take a big price adjustment. Do you have any idea of how much you expect that to be? How far away are we in some of these asset classes? Well, I think the high yield, for instance, that we could be 6 to 8 percentage points away. So it wouldn't surprise me to see triple C bonds move out from where they're trading today around 10% to something like 20. Double B bonds are trading around 4. They could be at 8. So, it would be easy to double the yield in high yield. Wow. And there's been a lot of debate about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's proposed 70% tax on all income above $10 million. Right. What do you think are the economic implications of something like that? Well, we've lived in these high tax regimes before. You go back into the 1930s, even the 1960s, we had very high marginal tax rates. When we cut tax rates in the 1980s, we had a huge productivity boom. And the reason for that is that people who were wealthy spent a lot of time sheltering their income, and they drove investment into marginally less productive assets than they would if they just had free flexibility to put the money where they wanted to. So, the frightening thing about high marginal tax rates is that it leads us into a low productivity economy. And we have a lot of headwinds already in this country. For instance, the growth in the working age population is declining dramatically. If you layer in on top of that high marginal tax rates, you could actually build an economy that has zero growth potential. And so I think policymakers have to be very careful when looking at putting high marginal tax rates on the rich. And when you look at the revenue attached to it, if the Washington Post is right, even let's assume that nobody makes a portfolio adjustment and they pay their marginal taxes, it's about $70 billion a year. In an economy that's running $1 trillion deficit, I think we should probably have lower hanging fruit to find ways to address the real issues that are being brought up by some people in Washington, like AOC or Bernie Sanders. There are real issues to be addressed, but I think that we need to get more private sector incentive to address the issues rather than to necessarily weigh the private sector down with high taxation.
There are a few words that are key to unlocking the economic arguments of this election campaign. Let's take a look at what a few of them mean.
Mr. Harper has got Canada heading into recession again.
In a time of recession,
to fall into permanent recession.
The Harper government's own legislation defines a recession as the economy shrinking for 2 straight quarters, a total of 6 months, through gross domestic product, or GDP. That's the value of all the goods and services produced in the country at a given point in time. So it seems simple enough. The economy shrank for at least half a year, or it didn't. But there are also concepts like a technical recession.
We are 1 month away from a technical definition of recession.
Sure, the economy shrank for half a year, but it's one industry that's feeling the biggest pain: energy. Some economists argue a true recession is driven by more than one sector. They would argue that makes this a recession in name only, aka a technical recession. Recessions can also be measured by other factors like retail sales and housing. It usually takes longer for that data to come in.
So that means that the economy did have a mild contraction in the first half.
The governor of the Bank of Canada has used the word contraction rather than recession, possibly to avoid wading into a heated political debate. A contraction acknowledges the economy has gotten worse, but it doesn't say for how long, so it isn't necessarily as bad as a recession.
Now the middle class sees its revenues stagnating.
We're stagnating in growth.
Economic stagnation is different from a recession. The economy doesn't have to shrink, but basically it comes to a standstill, either not growing or growing very little. And economists argue that we need growth to create jobs and wealth. That will help us pay for things that keep getting more expensive, like healthcare and pensions. Now, politicians want to promise growth for all of those reasons too, but right now it is also about growing their vote. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Revelation 13:16-17 in the King James Version. And he causes all, but small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number.
Earlier this week, Michelle Greenstein brought me, and brought you actually, a report on the coming cashless society. And we talked about eye scans, remember, and finger scans and facial scans, and how we're likely to see a future where your biometric information is linked to every transaction that you make. And we also showed you 40 different countries that have already developed some sort of biometric ID grid. But while looking into this, Michelle found a story that she thinks deserves a segment of its own. This one is about microchips, but not just microchips. Microchips being inserted into the bodies of human beings. So Michelle joins us now to tell us about this coming cashless society and how that might affect it as well. This is kind of creepy, but I can't wait to hear more about it. So microchips in human bodies. Do tell.
So these are radio frequency identification chips, or RFID.
Yeah.
This is the same exact technology that right now we have in most of our debit and credit cards. We also have a number of states, New York, Vermont, Michigan, that have already adopted an RFID chip program for their driver's licenses. And as more states sign on to this, this may become mandatory in the U.S. But let's talk about these chips, like you can see here, in your bodies. Look, with all technology, you have good and bad sides, right? So there's definitely potential for some good. If you're differently able, if you're perhaps unable to open a door without help, then this will allow you to gain access to your home. If you go to the hospital, they will have all your medical records right there. And then, of course, you have the issue of lost pets. Over the past few years, we've seen these heartwarming stories of owners being reunited with their dogs. This flooded the internet. Even Ohio State University said that dogs with chips are 2.5 times more likely to be returned home. So we're seeing this kind of technology being rolled out worldwide. In Spain, there are certain clubs where you can just use a microchip to skip the line. You don't have to wait in line. In Sweden, there are train tickets where you can just swipe your little hand and you don't have to have a tangible train ticket. And then, of course, there's this Wisconsin-based company called 3 Square Market. It's the first U.S.-based company to implant these microchips into their workers. You could use it to enter the building, to buy food in the company. Let's see what the CEO had to say about this process.
Okay.
The vast majority of our employees absolutely love the conveniences that having this chip in their hand really brings. I can log into my computer with this, which I do every day. I can log into my phone with it. I can pay for items if I forgot my credit card or my phone. I can log into work. This is the actual size of the chip. I don't know if you can see that, but it is the size of a grain of rice, literally.
So this is the kind of thing that could be really good for humanity, right? We could prevent identity theft. There's microchips in medications where we have wireless capsules that senses.
I get it. I mean,
right?
yeah. I mean, we got, in fact, here, I want to show the audience what we have here at RT. Like most buildings, we have our own security.
Swipe cards, for sure.
And I keep ours, you know, it's essentially just a little card, and whenever we walk into certain places, you got to show it, and then the door's
Right, and you don't
opening,
have to be like, I am Rick Sanchez, and I can prove it because this is my name, my address, my phone number.
Well, no,
you just have
I mean,
your card.
it makes sense. It would be nice if I didn't always have to be grabbing my wallet and finding it. So I understand what they're doing, but okay, so that's good, and it creates a certain amount of facility for things. I don't want something in my body, A, and B, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that then somebody could be surveilling me at all times.
Right, exactly. There's a huge privacy concern, and this is the type of ramification, political ramifications, that innovators usually don't consider. Of course, governments and corporations can exploit this kind of data and thus exploit you. But right now, this is not mandatory, right? Employers cannot mandate that you have this in your body. In California, there's actually a law that banned the forced implementation of these chips. Just this month, the Arkansas House voted to also ban employers from requiring implants in their employees. But look, with all technology, everything is voluntary until it's not, right? Until it's required.
Exactly.
So they shove this in our faces. There's a lot of mainstream coverage about this sort of trend.
Look how cool, right?
Exactly. And some people are scared of it. People talk about it. Most people hate it, as they do now, because it's very new. But then you have some people saying, oh, well, it's not so bad. And then, of course, you have the issue of economically forcing people. Like if you want to get a certain job or eat at a certain restaurant, you're going to choose to put this in your body. And then we have the case of Jane Goodyear. She was actually fined for failing to microchip her dog. Take a look at this headline. So it's only a matter of time before these types of policies make their way to microchipping your own self. So what we're seeing is increased surveillance, all in the name of convenience, as usual. Right now, we can unlock our phones with our faces, right? No one's putting a gun to your head and saying you have to get this smartphone, but you choose to. And the idea is that, look, soon everyone will have this technology, so I might as well get it early. I might as well jump on this bandwagon. And it really seems like we're looking at a future where everything is going to be networked, tracked, databased. Right now we have credit scores. We might be seeing social credit scores.
Do you ever see the possibility in your life, and I know you're kind of like a millennial, so I
am a millennial, technically.
Oh, boy, look at that. You are a millennial. And with pride, she says it. All right. Do you ever see a possibility where you would allow somebody to put something like that in your body?
Right now, no, but I cannot imagine that I can predict this kind of thing. Who knows? If everyone around me had it, if I lived 20 years from now, maybe everyone had it and I wouldn't even think twice.
Yeah, there was a time when we said that we would never have cell phones on us at all times, or we would never always have to use credit cards.
Right.
And
we just need to ask.
And it's become the new normal, right? It's the reality of our times.
We just need to ask who's behind this push, and we'll definitely follow up about that.
Millennial Michelle Greenstein joining us tonight with the Millennial Report.
Moving on to our top international story this hour, we are following some disturbing news out of the tech world, as this week the Confederation of British Industry, or CBI, issued a warning about the future of microchips in the workplace. According to The Guardian, a British company has already fitted 150 implants in the UK alone. Biotech's chips, according to its website, quote, store a range of encrypted personal data from bank account details and passwords to medical data or Bitcoin wallet details. The device is implanted between the thumb and forefinger, and depending on which kit you choose, costs between $90 and just over $330. The CBI, which represents 140 trade associations and 190,000 businesses, told The Guardian, quote, while technology is changing the way we work, this makes for distinctly uncomfortable reading. Firms should be concentrating on rather more immediate priorities and focusing on engaging their employees. The organization is concerned that employers could eventually force workers to be chipped, the way you may chip your pets, for example. The Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress in the UK added, quote, microchipping would give bosses even more power and control over their workers. There are obvious risks involved, and employers must not brush them aside or pressure staff into being chipped. Now, you might be thinking such concerns sound hyperbolic, but you would actually be sadly mistaken. Believe it or not, companies have already started microchipping employees. For example, a cafeteria kiosk producer in River Falls, Wisconsin, chipped employees last year.
There are governments that run central banks that they were one of the first ones to call us to say, we've got to control our employees, and we need to have certain access levels, and we can't have that compromise, and they saw that as a solution. They need that. They need those controls.
Joining us now with the future of microchipping in question is former UK Member of Parliament George Galloway. All right, George, how difficult is it really to remember banking information? I mean, do you think average people really want these chips?
Well, I'm sure not. I mean, beasts are branded and slaves are enchained. This is, I suppose, the next stage. The wage slave will be microchipped. And the employer, imagine Amazon, just for an example, other brands are available, employing 500,000 people, every one of them one day perhaps microchipped. So the company will not be able just to employ you at rock bottom rates. It will know how long you went to the toilet for electronically. I might even know what you did there. It is grotesque, it is obscene, it is on the face of it ridiculous, except, as you've just pointed out, it's already happening. And even here in Britain, it's happening. It's happening in the United States. It's happening in the tech industries already. And of course, it's all very well saying it's voluntary, but when you're a wage slave, voluntary doesn't mean much. If it's get this job and sign up for the chip, or don't get the job, well, people will take the chip.
What concerns do you have about this technology, and are you confident in the British government's ability to regulate these chips?
I wouldn't be confident in the British government's ability to regulate fish and chips, never mind microchips. And indeed, the British government might be gone by the end of the week. No, I am not at all confident. But it is come to something when the CBI, which is the employers, the bosses' organization, are expressing their anxiety and unease about this move. The trade union opposition to it will be absolute, but we know from recent times that what starts out as resolute opposition incrementally becomes the prevailing orthodoxy, and it would be it would be a dystopian Aldous Huxley future if that's how we all ended up, chipped by our employer.
I want to ask you one more question unrelated to this issue, though, because we did just get breaking news that a Brexit draft has been reached between British and EU negotiators. What are you hearing in London, and what are your initial thoughts on this development?
Well, the cabinet are being brought in one by one to the Prime Minister's office to go through this text, which seems to suggest that she's not confident of facing them as a collective. And we must assume, if the text is as disappointing as many think it will be from either side of the argument, that there will be ministerial resignations as a result. Whatever the cabinet decides, Parliament is very unlikely to agree this text, and therefore we either plunge out of the European Union without any agreement at all, or Parliament collapses the executive with a real possibility of a general election before Christmas.
Exciting news coming out of London then. We'll stay on top of it, and hopefully as we get more details of this plan, talk to you about it tomorrow to see what exactly you think about its little details. Thanks so much, former UK MP George Galloway.
Latest office innovation is a microchip implanted in the skin and designed to replace the traditional keypad for opening doors, using the copier, even buying food in the cafeteria. To some, it's right out of 1984, but Jamie Yukas found willing workers in 2017.
So you can keep an eye on me?
Yes. To some, it may sound like a plot of a James Bond movie. But in River Falls, Wisconsin, employees at a vending company are going from the assembly line to front of the pack to get microchipped.
Do you think this is the future?
It is the future, and we look at this as being responsible.
Todd Westby is the owner of 3 Square Market. By next week, at least 50 of his 80 employees have signed up to become bionic, using what's called a RFID transponder in a microchip meant to make the workplace experience faster and more efficient.
So when you have the chip, you're just going to hold it up here and all those same options will come up?
The implant, which has been FDA approved, is the size of a grain of rice and is injected under the skin between the thumb and index finger by a licensed piercer. This company is offering the chips, which cost about $300 a piece, to its employees for free. Westby says they are not GPS enabled yet.
You're not going to be tracking your employees around town to see what they're up to and what they're doing?
No, we will not. It's for entrance to the building, logging into computers, making purchases in our break room market.
Westby says even if GPS became available, he would not use it on employees.
The concerns are, what information am I storing on this? What information am I giving away?
CNET editor Dan Ackerman says this technology raises red flags over privacy.
Anything can really potentially be hacked, especially because most of the actual information, it's not encoded on the tiny device under your skin of your hand by itself. You can never leave it behind. You can't really turn it off.
However, assembly line worker Eric White plans to be the first in line. He thinks someday the chips could save lives.
Somebody who's allergic to something or has a condition, they could scan your hand and all the information is there.
A promising self-service for some, a dystopian nightmare for others. Either way, the future is here. Jamie Yukas, CBS News,
You've
River
seen
Falls,
them in
Wisconsin.
science fiction, but soon you may see them everywhere. These security robots. KPX5's John Ramos saw one on its beat in Marin County and gives us a look.
Recently, I was at this Shell station in San Rafael when I saw something I had never seen before that was causing everyone to do double takes. I realize now what I was looking at was the future.
I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I guess it cleans the gas station or something.
I thought it was a garbage can, and then I seen it moving in with the camera, so.
What looks like R2-D2's big brother is actually the K5, a robot security guard produced by a Mountain View tech company called Nightscope. At 5 feet tall and weighing 400 pounds, the K5 is covered with video cameras and sensors as it moves around in a predetermined pattern, keeping an electronic eye on the restrooms and car wash at the back of the station.
You know, you've got Roombas and stuff like that. I guess now we've got like human-sized automated security guards at the gas station. I don't know.
With its flashing lights and weird futuristic sounds, the K5 is a high-profile surveillance droid, constantly uploading video and even license plate numbers to a cloud-based server. They operate autonomously, 24/7, occasionally heading to a charging pad for a quick lunch break. At a product unveiling, the company's CEO explained the concept.
Our strategy is to give security guards and law enforcement professionals really smart eyes and ears for them to do their jobs more effectively.
K5s are starting to pop up at shopping areas and businesses around the country. They have collision avoidance sensors, but they're not perfect. One of them drowned when it missed some stairs and fell into a Washington, D.C. fountain. But mostly, they do the job they were built for, keeping an eye on humans, leaving them wondering what the world is coming to.
What are you gonna do? It's part of us, you know? That's what we created, so it's got a brain, it's doing something, it's thinking.
I don't think it has a gun, but I can't guarantee that.
No, thank God, it doesn't have a gun. That would be scary if it goes that far.
The CEO dismisses the idea that the robots are meant to replace human workers, but they are being marketed as costing $6 to $12 per hour, a number that is easy to compare to a minimum wage job. In San Rafael, John Ramos, KPIX5.
When this takes place, thousands of tons of atomized earth, stone, brick and steel are sucked up into the mushroom cloud.
Humanity is teetering dangerously close to the apocalypse. At least according to the group of scientists that manage the iconic Doomsday clock. This year, the hands of the clock were left unchanged from 2018, remaining at an unnerving 2 minutes to midnight. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists Group created the Doomsday Clock as a symbolic timepiece that represents humanity's perceived proximity to a human-caused apocalypse. The closer the clock gets to midnight, the higher the chance that we'll completely annihilate the world with technologies and destruction of our own making. Before last year, the last time it was set to 2 minutes to midnight was in 1953, when the US and the Soviet Union tested their first nuclear weapon.
We take you now to the Yucca Flats of Nevada for the atomic explosion, Operation Doorstep, Phase 2.
But before you hide away in a bunker, just know that the clock shouldn't be taken literally. It is meant to be more of a visual metaphor for how close we are in ending civilization. It does not represent actual time, nor is it linear. The Doomsday Clock has been around since 1947 in response to growing nuclear threats. Back then, the clock was set at 7 minutes to midnight. Now, more than just nuclear threats are considered when making the assessment. The scientists also consider threats like climate change and bioterrorism. Fortunately, it's possible to turn back the hands of this clock.
Stop! Let me out! Let me out! I want out!
Portions of the following program may be unsuitable for younger or more sensitive viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Remember, the enemy has only images and illusions, behind which he hides his true motives. Destroy the image, and you will break the enemy.
I'm here to tell you tonight that the businessmen, the mayor of this city, the police commissioner of this city, and everybody in the white power structure of this city must take a responsibility for everything.
Can you feel it?
Luther and I, and everyone in this arena tonight, are unified by the same great American values. We're proud of our country. We respect our flag. Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
Race is when you use your power and influence to subject people into inferiority. Utterances can't be racist.
Look around you, man. They own this shit. They own this couch you sitting on, them shoes you got on your feet, this building, this school, this country, you. We're behind enemy lines, dog.
So you must first of all remember that this system was not originally designed with black people in mind. Right on! And it definitely was not prepared for black people to, in the end, begin to demand their rights and an equal share in this country which they died for. Right on. Hey, and we definitely are not going back to Africa.
In the church, we used to sing the song, "Good news, the chariot is coming." While you sit here today, knowing that you have come to hear good news, you must realize in advance what good news for you might be bad news for somebody else. What good news for the sheep might be bad news for the wolf.
They say, oh, things are getting so much better for you. In 1849, it was hitting blacks on the head 100 times a day. In 1990, they hit them 48 times a day. Isn't it better? Oh, it's got to be better. You're saved 52 blows.
The only purpose of most black Americans on earth today is to destroy.
I think that's noble. Italians love Italians. When Irish love Irish. But when a nigga loves a nigga, it's an unpardonable sin.
They have blood in their hands. When we say they have blood in their hands, we are not saying him, George Bezos, went and killed. But white people colonized us. They dispersed us. They enslaved our people. They sucked our economy dry. They are still sucking it dry even today. That's white people. Tony Blair, George Bush, Napoleon Bonaparte, Leopold, Adolf Hitler, Benjamin Netanyahu, all white people, they are the same. They are racist and they are full of hate.
I've been waiting for you. You have many questions, and though the process has altered your consciousness, you remain irrevocably human. Ergo, some of my answers you will understand, and some of them you will not. Concordantly, while your first question may be the most pertinent, you may or may not realize it is also the most irrelevant.
Why am I here?
Our world is coming crumbling down. The coons are coming.
You got to understand that white America has an uncanny way of making the victim the victimizer. Excuse me, master, for putting my head in the way of your club. Not that your club is brutalizing my head and putting hickeys on it. My head got in the way of your free swing and broke your shiny stick, and I want to apologize for that.
Your life is the sum of a remainder of an unbalanced equation inherent to the programming of the Matrix. You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision. While it remains a burden assiduously avoided, it is not unexpected and thus not beyond a measure of control, which has led you inexorably here.
There are more connections in the human body than there are stars in the galaxy. We possess a gigantic network of information to which we have almost no access.
Matrix is older than you know. I prefer counting from the emergence of one integral anomaly to the emergence of the next, in which case this is the sixth version.
5 ones before me. There are only two possible explanations. There were 5 ones before me. Either no one told me, or no one knows.
Precisely. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equations.
Control me! I'm gonna smash you to You can't make me do anything like trick! Choice. The problem is choice.
Let us remember that we are not brutalized because we're Baptists. We're not brutalized because we're Methodists. We're not brutalized because we're Muslims. We're not brutalized because we're Catholics. We're brutalized because we are black people in America.
Because white people made him to be what he is. They made him to look evil, because that's their role, to make all of us black people to look evil and to hate ourselves. I can't hate.
You're a nigga till you die. If you're a poor nigga, you're a poor nigga. If you're a rich nigga, you're a rich nigga. But you never stop being a nigga, and if you get to be educated, you're just an educated nigga.
I'm told every day I'm on air that I'm racist because I call out racism. That is maddening to me, and I'm crying about it because it's crazy.
So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is teaching you and I and trying to tell the white man to get this powder keg out of his house. Let the black man separate from his house. Let the black man have his own house. Let the black man have his own land and his own property.
I thought the bitch was white! Damn it! I thought the bitch was white!
That's true.
I think that white people are so guilty, knowing what they've done to black people, that they feel if the deeds were reversed, they would hate the black man if he had done the same thing to them. So it's actually, it reflects a guilt complex on the part of whites when they ask us, do we hate them? And if you notice, Uncle Sam has formed a habit of going all over the world. He calls it the ugly American, or the American image. He thinks that everybody hates him because it's a guilt complex. And if you think that if you are worried about Europeans hating you, and they're your allies and your cousins. Well, naturally, it would follow for you to think that Negroes in this country would hate you, especially in light of what has been done to black people in this country by white people.
Now, check it out. The white ball dominates everything, right? Knocks the shit out the yellow ball, the red ball, right? And the game's over when the white ball drives the black ball completely off the table.
But you have to see that all of this is hypocrisy.
I love Malcolm. Malcolm called me the Sunday that he died. I was working Basin Street East. He said, "Brother Greg, you coming by today?" And I said, "Malcolm, I love you." And I said, "I love you so much, I don't even want to take a chance to be there." He said, "What do you mean, Brother Greg?" I said, "Well, I close tonight, Sunday night at Basin Street East." And I said, "But I had my wife book me a flight into Chicago at 8 o'clock this morning, and I'm going to Chicago, and I had way beneath my salary booked me into a college about 10 miles from the airport. And I'm going to go there and speak this afternoon, and I'm going to stay there until they tell me you dead. Because I'm not going to let this government get two of us for the price of one. And I'm going to call Adam Clayton Powell when I finish talking to you and beg him not to come there. Because today, the United States government is going to get you."